Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi and welcome back to That Trippi Show with Alex Ashlow. This week, everybody needs to calm down. Come on, folks.
Really. Say it like 8 times. Calm down.
Yeah. This race is not yo-yoing around. There is a ton of noise right now and everyone should take a deep breath. Our party does a great job of telling us we are losing for things like fundraising. And yes, we got a campaign like we are behind. Then you add up all the ridiculous polls out there. No wonder you're all stressed. But for everyone's mental health, seriously, we're going to zoom out a little bit and explain why all this panic is premature. It's not even premature, it's ridiculous at best. I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but it's not hopium. It's 40 years of experience backed up by a ton of data. Alex, where do you want to get started, my friend?
Joe, before we get too far into it, I do want to remind everyone about something. And I think this gets to your point in the intro. We have gotten more listener questions than I think we've probably ever had this week. And I would say 90% of them were all very, very concerned about polls. Joe, explain to us why we ought to be a lot calmer than we are.
Well, first of all, it's really important to understand that polls suck. They just do. And you shouldn't pay a whole lot of attention to them. You shouldn't even pay attention to the head-to-head or any of those kinds of things. And I want to make sure you all understand the massive amount of red waving that's happening. I mean, over 2/3 of these polls are done by Republican-aligned groups with very skewed numbers. And the reason why is pretty simple, because you look at the media who keep aggregating poll results, 538, The Hill, Real Clear Politics, they're all including these polls into their projections. So you see what's projected is Trump's chances of victory go way up because of all those polls. Don't buy it. It's ridiculous. Simon Rosenberg did an analysis on his blog today of polls that have come out recently. If you take the independent polls, I mean, polls that have done by legitimate, independent, quality pollsters, Harris is up 2.7 nationally.
It's almost always 49, 46.
Yeah, something like that. It's going to go up. The right-aligned polls, in other words, you take all the junk polls that have been thrown in from companies and pollsters who are releasing them saying they're independent, but 99% of what they do is poll for Republican candidates for Senate or House or governor. Those right-aligned polls have Trump up by 1. So that's like literally almost a 4-point swing in the difference. Now you're a poll aggregator. And by the way, there's more of the right-aligned polls being released than independent polls. So you get more of them showing Trump up and fewer showing independent polls showing Harris up. And then you average them. And what you get is a dead heat or Trump's up and then you have aggregators who basically, and media hype from the networks, from cable, who want to keep you glued to your seat and on edge and freaking out and hopefully not sleeping at night. So you're watching more of them with the TV on while you cringe with the pillow over your head. We did a Resolute Square strategy session with Matt Dowd Tuesday, and he's right. He said, throw out all the junk and corrupt GOP right-wing polls released over the last month, and you have a very clear picture of this race. Harris is winning. Absolutely, totally correct. And by the way, as you know, many of you know that for the better part of, I don't know how long, I've been saying 46-53 structure of the race. Doesn't mean it'll end up being 46-53. It means that's the structure of this race. I think, as Alex pointed out, most of those polls that have been out there on the independent side that have Harris up by, plus 2.7 have been in the 49 to 46 range. My guess is more of those voters are going to break her way. The turnout differential, the ability of her ground game, et cetera, probably moves her closer to that 46, 52, 53. We'll see where it ends up. Third parties are going to get something here, even though they are diminishing to almost zero. But anyway, Alex.
Here's a good example. You look at Tip, who people probably aren't familiar with that pollster, but they were pretty accurate in 2020. I think we've talked about it before. They have it back at a +3 Kamala lead. And a few days ago, I think it was either tied or Trump might have taken a lead. What I think people might be missing is at this point in the cycle, all these polls, it's not like it was a couple months ago where you do one poll over 4 or 5 days and then you push the results. These are constant tracking polls. So they're doing smaller samples every single night and doing rolling averages. What that means is sometimes, yeah, the polling numbers do bounce around, as Joe and I can attest to in every race we've done. But it does end up returning to a norm that once you kind of see through the breathless headlines, it happens. But if you don't balance those samples every night, and I think as Matt Dowd also pointed out, you do get all of a sudden, Tip has Trump up 1. No. So, yeah, Joe, I agree. We should not get sucked in.
No, that's what's going on too. I mean, look, the campaign wants everybody to believe it's very close. They need that because, as I said, it's that turnout. It's the machinery to get out the vote that needs people to think, hey, it's close, my vote, I've got to get out there. We all want that because that is what's going to get her to 52, that attitude of all of us. Take that energy and use it to get people out or to send more help in, both financially, postcards, whatever. But anything else, the worry doesn't do you any good. And frankly, I think it's a lot of worry about basically bullshit polls.
It's manufactured. Yeah.
Look, a reason for this, it's the same reason like 4 or 5 mega accounts are suddenly buying up Trump on the betting markets and putting Trump ahead there. Yes, it's to help try to demoralize Democrats and encourage their base to vote by creating this phony atmosphere. Remember, by the way, the red wave that never came. This is exactly a replay of that. But I think fundamentally, the difference between 2022 and the red mirage, red wave that never happened, and why they're doing it this time, yes, it does have that impact of sort of demoralizing and energizing their base, demoralizing or making Democrats worry. But the bigger reason I think they're doing it this time is so Trump can go out at 9 o'clock at night and say, on election night, and say, hey, all the polls had me ahead. The betting markets all had me ahead. It's 9 o'clock and I'm winning. I won. And tonight, after you go to sleep, don't let them steal it. And it's all part of the setup for the next big lie. And that's what I really think is going on here. That's the period. That's what we have to most worry about. I think as long as we do the work, we're going to win. The problem will be all this fake poll stuff and the betting markets and all that. It's just running ahead of the game to set up the big lie that Donald Trump intends to rev up on election night.
I'm going to read you something from JVL at the Bulwark. This is from his newsletter today, which this is something we've been saying in different ways to people for weeks, but it gets to the whole, like, throw out every poll, throw out all pieces of data for a second, and just think in your head about how the race is actually going. Like, what is happening in the race? And he points out, and I'm going to quote this, pretend the polls have shifted a touch in Trump's favor the last 6 weeks. Why would that have happened? Who had a better convention and got a larger convention bounce? Kamala Harris. Who won the debate? Harris. Has the final economic data been good or bad? It's been very good. And I would editorialize it's exceeded all expectations. Who's gotten big historic endorsements down the stretch from members of the other party? Obviously Harris. Who's campaigned with more energy and vigor? Harris. Who's canceling interviews, looking like a fool on stage, looking mentally and physically lost? Trump. Who had a last minute scandal? Trump. So you just add every one of those things up, and then you see the polls and you're like, what the hell? But if his point is, if you saw the last 6 weeks of the campaign without seeing any polls, and someone told you Harris would be up 7, you'd probably think that would actually make a lot of sense. The polls are flying in the face of reality, and I think JVL does a really good job of explaining that. I think that's why he has a paid newsletter and we're stuck on a podcast, but same idea.
He said, we hunt around for rationalizations to explain what is at root not qualitatively explicable. It's just, it doesn't make sense. Again, look at the independent polls, the quality polls. Also, if you start really, again, as we always say, look under the hood, and you see things like for the first time, Harris has pulled even on who would be better to keep cost of living down. All the things that have been way out there and that Trump has been pounding on, they're not advantages anymore. If you look underneath everything and look at the questions that have been asked, it's really amazing. On hold the line on taxes, it's like a dead heat. I think I saw Messina on MSNBC, I think on Morning Joe this morning, say he can't remember in his lifetime a Democrat ever being even with a Republican on holding the line on taxes. I mean, all those things that should be and have been advantages, getting back to what you were just saying, if you look at all those things and you look at where those numbers are right now, Harris is pulling away from this guy. And so whether it's there's silent Republican women who are basically living in a Trump household and are going to go into the, I don't know. That's the only way I could explain a legitimate, why do the legitimate polls have her up to 7 when I think 2.7 when I think it's going to be more like 5. But, where does that come from? Well, some of it'll be her getting out more of the vote. And some of it will be, I think, people breaking to her and not breaking to third parties, which was part of the problem with Biden. But anyway, look, I just think if you look at it, everything that I've seen in the 40 years I've been doing this, in all the time I've done this, when I look at the groups that are out there and how they're likely to break, they're likely to break to Harris. There's no one left out there who's thinking, hey, no, maybe I'll break to Trump. That's not going to happen. I mean, I think some of those people may stay home, and that may happen even in his base. I mean, I'm not sure every tech bro supporter of his, every ultimate fighting championship young supporter of his is going to come out. We'll see. But I don't think so. I think he's going to drop in turnout and she will expand.
Joe, I want to get to one listener question. This is from Michael in California. I think he was watching Harry Enton on CNN. Harry said something along the lines of, it's likely to be a blowout, quote unquote, in the Electoral College. His point is that someone is probably getting more than 300 electoral votes. And his argument is many of the swing states are close, but they're likely all moving in similar directions. He doesn't say blowout for one candidate or another, so he doesn't say Trump will win in a blowout, Harris will win in a blowout, but just a blowout. Do you buy that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's going to happen. I think, look, if she really is 3 points ahead right now and it's been moving in her direction, again, same thing. We talked about this in the past. Biden was at 70% with blacks. She's in the 80s with blacks. She's going to get to the 90s with them because it get out the vote. Some people who don't even know they're going to be voting yet, they're going to get their door knocked on and urged to go vote. All that is going to raise her levels with college towns, et cetera. So remember, Biden won in 2020 with 51% of the vote. It was 51 to 46.7. And he won some of them close, really close. I mean, 16,000 votes in Arizona, 14,000 votes in Georgia, I think, or thereabouts, 44,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was close. That's how it happens. I mean, in other words, if she's growing into the over 50, which is what I think is going to be needed to win this, I don't see how Trump gets to 50. If she's growing to over 50 nationally, and with her apparatus and support and field organization in the battleground states, I think it's very likely that Harris wins most of them, if not all of them. And I do think he's right. Look, if all these are, let's say every single one of them is a dead heat, every single battleground state's a dead heat. Remember what I said about when I look at the groups that are likely to break, which way are they going to break? And so you look at all the groups that are out there and they all look to me like they break to Kamala Harris. I mean, there's all these things, reasons why might she do a little bit better with women? Why might she do a little bit better with blacks, et cetera? I mean, as turnout happens and as people break and as undecideds break, the person they know the most about in this race is Trump. If my experience has always been, if you know the most about somebody and it's this late in the game and you're not voting for them, you haven't made up your mind yet, you tend to break the other way to the person. I know people hear all this on TV all the time. I just don't know enough about her yet. It's true. She's only been a candidate for like 100 days. And so what happens in that situation, I have found, is that the person who they know the most about, that they're still undecided about, they break towards the new person, the person that they're just learning about. Yeah, they may have some doubts. They may wonder about it, but that's where they break to. A lot of them stay home too. But I'm just saying the people who come out and actually vote, I think they break away from Trump. And so if that's happening nationally, if you have a complete dead heat in these battleground states and any break to Kamala Harris or to the other way, but any break is going to win all those states. And the thing then is, okay, as Harry Enton says, he's not going to tell you which direction, et cetera, which candidate will win the blowout or the other. But okay, then if you accept that, it's really a question of who is out there that could break to Trump, who is out there that could break to Kamala Harris. Well, you've got Republicans, you've got generals, you've got all kinds of people out there who are saying right now to Republicans, this is why you should break away from Donald Trump. There's all kinds of people, whether it's Dobbs dads, whether it's the Red Dawn Republicans that we talk about, that Alex and I in the Lincoln Project are going after. There's all kinds of groups out there that are wavering. But if they break, by the way, those two groups, they're with Trump. They're already eroding and breaking away to Harris now. Now, do they break even more? The same as you see are growing with Democratic constituencies. So no, I think this is all about, if the break is happening the way I see it, you're going to get to that 53-46, maybe it's 57-42, but somewhere in there, that's how this is going to end up. Remember, Biden got 51 and barely won a bunch of these states, but he won most of them, a lot of them. And the real question here will be, if she gets better than that, like if she does get to 52 or 53, yeah, it's going to be even more of a blowout.
So, Joe, zooming out, is there anything else nationally that you think people actually should be paying attention to in the last week or so? Any new developments?
The Washington Post had a poll showing Harris leading in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. And they also had Trump ahead in North Carolina, Arizona, and they're tied in Nevada. So if you take the conversation we were just having and things break to Harris the way I think they will, so that's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that's the blue wall right there. Then you add Georgia. And if Nevada's tied, and I still think North Carolina, I really will not be surprised if Kamala Harris somehow pulls out North Carolina. But anyway, what I thought was, again, fascinating was that poll showed Harris up 82-12 with black voters. That's a few points behind Biden did in 2020, I mean. And I think that's what I'm talking about. That's not going to stop there. That's going, you watch. Even if you look at the 82-12, that's 94. There's 6 more points. Those 6 more points may not be people breaking to her, maybe just turning people out who aren't answering the polls. But, that's 85% of blacks in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, according to that poll. This is what I mean by looking under the hood a bit. It's not necessarily sometimes the head-to-head. It's like, where is she with a key group? And by the way, here's the other thing about turnout. The Republicans have always had a different problem with turning out their votes because it's tough to go door to door in rural America, and not every door is one that's going to be a Republican or supportive of Trump. They've got to try to figure that all out. When you've got any group that's voting 85%, like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, or 83% of voters, black voters in Georgia, it's pretty easy on election day, particularly if you know who's voted already early voting. You can really focus a well-funded, well-volunteered and paid operation to make sure that you are getting that 85% group out. And Alex, you saw this in Alabama with Doug Jones. I mean, we were able to concentrate on turning out our vote when we were getting something like over 90%. But you know who those voters are, you know that who has or hasn't voted early. And it's a totally different problem on the Republican side. They don't have that kind of support in any one area. I mean, maybe a dinky rural county, but it could turn out the whole thing. It doesn't really matter. So I just think that there are a bunch of advantages here. And I would bet anybody that when you do the exit polls, Kamala is going to be doing a lot better with some of these Democratic groups than even that 82-12. The one thing that I do have concerns about that's developed in the last week, particularly on an early vote, I think there's a lot of people out there that don't understand that 2020 was so different in terms of the early vote, in terms of the mail-in ballots because of COVID, all that kind of stuff, that, making bold predictions is just guessing. But the guy I do trust is John Ralston in Nevada. He's always been dead on, and he's showing that so far rural and GOP voting in Nevada is outpacing the Democrats in Clark County. I think there was an uptick today that showed Democrats closing a little bit in Clark County, but this isn't normal. It's not the way it usually happens. Usually Democrats are just moving away and banking and outpacing Republicans with a massive Clark County lead. So traditionally, this would mean bad news. But like I said, we saw today, I think in his report this morning, that there was a big bump up in Clark County. Still hasn't erased where the GOP has. The question will be, was that like just the first day where the GOP threw everything that everybody who was going to vote early did, and it drops off while the Democrats really kick in and start building a Clark County lead? We'll see. And the other possibility is, that more Democrats are going to vote on Election Day now. So Nevada's the one place early on where it just seems like we've got some catching up to do. We'll see. And it may just be, like I said, that Republicans really hit all the cylinders on day one, and that's the only people that are going to vote early, and the rest are going to show up on Election Day. We'll see. But I know, Alex, that you've been looking at the data. What else are you seeing?
Two really things, if you look at two of the other states we're looking at. Pennsylvania, I'm sure a lot of people have been following vote drops, but basically the fundamental question is, how many of these early votes are going to turn? How much of that are we borrowing from Election Day? Tom Bonnier, who is one of the best at this, pointed out at this point in 2020, the early vote was plus 52 Democrats, which is a huge number. Obviously, that was when Trump and the Republicans were really trying to discredit early voting. We had a pandemic, et cetera. Right now, it's plus 32, which is still impressive, but obviously a lot lower. And his point was, does this still mean the GOP has a massive intensity advantage? No, it means the GOP has just converted the vote mode a lot of their voters. So they're getting more people back to early vote, which makes sense. They've softened on the early vote stuff, but we're going to see. But it looks like there's a pretty big advantage right now that Democrats have. They call it the firewall in Pennsylvania. It's still growing. We'll monitor that. But all of this, it's doom and gloom for one side or the other. I still think it's too early to tell. And then if you look at Michigan, we're a state that consistently has in the polls that I know we're supposed to ignore Kamala ahead. Patrick Hsu from America Votes, who's brilliant, one of the smarter people who understands Michigan. He ran Michigan last time. He's pointing out that a lot of the trends are either mirroring or better for Democrats than either in 2020 or 2022. He points out things like the gender gap, 57% of ballot requests have been from women. And the most interesting thing, and this is something that so far is unique to Michigan, but we might see it elsewhere, is infrequent voters. Actually, Democrats are starting to bake a little bit of an advantage with them in Michigan, which what we've heard so often in the press is that Trump surge, the low information, infrequent voters are going to come out for him. But we're not seeing it so far in Michigan. So hopefully that continues.
Yeah, that's unusual because I don't think even in Pennsylvania we've been seeing that on the Democratic side yet. So, I mean, in Michigan, for whatever reasons, I don't know, maybe we'll see that in other places, but it's real unusual for us to start banking an advantage with infrequent voters.
Let's get to a couple more listener questions, because again, these are not from the only ones of these questions we've gotten, but just pick two. This is from Sarah in Minnesota. What's Kamala doing in Texas? And for our listeners, she's doing a rally that I believe Beyonce has been announced with. But again, the Beyonce thing last time, who knows? But she'll be in Houston for a rally. Joe, why is she going to Texas?
I think a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's the epicenter with Abbott for abortion bans and everything else. So it brings attention to that. But second of all, and I think maybe more importantly, is to keep it close there helps Colin Allred with a real shot at defeating Ted Cruz. It's one to really showcase the contrast between the two parties on an important issue, particularly post-Roe, and at the same time put some energy and literally be campaigning in Texas helps Colin Allred in a race, by the way, that's now low single digits. He's really closed the gap with Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz is the most disliked politician in the state of Texas. So there's a real shot at winning it. I don't know, Alex, you got anything else to add to why?
It's one stop. This is not 2016. And I think that a lot of the questions were blowback and worry from trying to expand the map to places where Democrats were not competitive. And that is not what's happening here.
I think this is not about expanding the electoral college map at all. That'd be crazy. This is about the Senate hangs in the balance. And there's a Texas race that is low single digits with a really strong Democratic candidate who's right on the heels of taking Ted Cruz out. So if you want to throw your anxiety away, throw a little money at Colin Allred, do some postcards, whatever. But I think that's what the signal here is that this is a Senate seat now that's in play and we can win.
Joe, this is we're just about out of time, but one more. This is from Jack in Pennsylvania. You have one stat or one trend that people aren't talking enough about.
Yeah, it's the old follow the money. Look at where the big independent expenditure campaigns are putting their money. So the House Majority PAC for Democrats, really interesting development the last 3 days. They are canceling, I mean, how much? Like $18 million?
Yeah, no, I can run it. It's places like Pennsylvania, one race in Pennsylvania, a race in Kansas, one in Michigan that they feel pretty good about.
No, but they're canceling something like $18 million of TV advertising in like 11 districts. So here's oh my gosh, they're canceling. No, they're canceling it in 10 districts because it's a waste of money because the Democrats are fine. They don't need it. They've decided those 10 seats Democrats are going to win them and they don't need to waste any money on them. At the same time, they only pulled out of one district because they thought it's over, we can't win it. And we're not going to waste money chasing a district that's no longer in play. So you had 11 districts that were in play. They had $18 million committed to those districts. 10 of them we're going to win, one, it turns out, and one, well, we tried, but it's not going to happen. So what are they doing? Where are they moving that money? Because they have it. It turns out they're expanding into other races in places like New Jersey, district races that were not thought to be as much in play or as in the original targets. They're expanding out. Alex and I are seeing some of this play out potentially in a race we're in. So when you start looking at like things like that, when you start seeing a party, normally, by the way, look, I've been doing this 40 years. Normally when you hear of a party or a major PAC, i.e. PAC, pulling out of race after race after race, it's usually a really bad sign. It's usually that the races are going the other way and but all hope is lost. When you see this, when you see a committee pulling out of battleground races because we've won them with 13 days left to go, or 12 by the time you hear this, and we've only lost one of them. And geez, they've now got better things to do with the money, like fight over districts where a Democrat might be down by 2 points or 3 points, and they're surprised that the momentum is lifting Democrats up And now they can throw money at people who've clawed their way to 2 points, 3 points behind and make a significant difference. That's going to be a pretty interesting situation in which I think we're going to be surprised by, if you follow money and start looking at what the House Majority PAC is doing. I think you're going to be surprised on election day. And I think the GOP is too, because this portends well for us taking the House back.
Joe, I think that's a really good place for us to end today. We're just about out of time, but I think a lot of our listeners are really going to appreciate being able to, that kind of exhale, deep breath.
Yeah. For the first time, I think there's a real shot that we hold the Senate. I think, look, if you can help Tester, help him. I think he's coming on. I think he can beat Tim Sheehy in Montana. And I think Allred can win in Texas. And I still think Debbie Merkersel-Powell has a shot. She's a longer shot, but she has a shot, particularly with abortion being on the ballot. She has a shot in Florida. And so right now, if a month or two ago, I would have told you no way that we can hold the Senate. I'm not saying we are, but for the first time, I think we have a real shot at doing it. And that would be an amazing election night to pull all three of those off. So thanks everyone for listening to That Trippi Show. Go check out Says Us. That's SEZ.US. It's now open for everyone at SEZ.US. This podcast will always be free with support from our advertisers and as part of Resolute Square. Check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to That Trippi Show. Leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, and a lot of it turns out are, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question and a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.
Resolute Square.